Let me just see who's gotten order of arrival.
Okay, so Sabino is on. He is listed as 6353598.
Excellent. Right now I have Councilor O'Malley, Councilor Bach, Councilor Braden, and Councilor Mejia. And just first, we're going to go ahead and get started then. All right. Just do my quick opening spiel. Where did my opening spiel go? Sorry about that.
You don't have it memorized yet, Councilor Edwards.
Oh, I'm sure you do, Councilor Bach. But no, a lot of other things on my mind as of late. But let's see. Where on earth? We did get a letter from Secretary Galvin's office noting that they will not be in attendance. For those who are curious and waiting. It's frustrating. All right, well, I will make do and just quickly open on a working session. There we go. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm City Councilor Lydia Edwards, Chair of the Committee on Government Operation. It is Wednesday, October 14th, and we're here today on a virtual working session on docket 0643, order for a hearing to explore preparation for the upcoming 2020 elections in September and November. Councilor Mattingly is the sponsor of this docket, and it was referred to the committee on April 15th, 2020. The committee held a hearing on this matter on May 15th and a working session on August 6th. In accordance with Governor Baker's executive order, we're modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law and to balance both the safety needs and also the ability for us to do our jobs. The public may watch this meeting via live stream at www.boston.gov/city-council-tv. It will also be rebroadcasted at a later date on Comcast 8, RCN82, Verizon 1964. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov. The purpose of this docket is to ensure that the upcoming elections provide safe ways for people to vote. At the hearing, we discussed all of the preparation. We then had a subsequent working session in advance of the primaries. And today we're going to have another working session in advance of our general elections. We're going to hear from the Commissioner of Elections about the things that went well, about things that need improvement, and also about any additional preparation we're doing this for this November 3rd election. Wanted to thank those in attendance from the administration. We have Commissioner Ineida Tavares from the Boston Election Department, and Sabina Pamonte, who's the Assistant Registrar. And I'm also joined by my colleagues, Councilor O'Malley, Councilor Liz Braden, Councilor Bach, Councilor Mejia, and also Councilor Arroyo. And just making sure I'm gonna let Councilor Arroyo in. We're going to do some very brief opening remarks. We don't expect this to be a long hearing, but we're all excited about hearing about what's going on. So I'm going to kick it over to the lead sponsor, Councilor O'Malley, and then in order of arrival, it'll be Councilor Braden, Councilor Bach, Councilor Braden, Councilor Mejia, and then Councilor Arroyo. Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm sorry, I was trying to adjust my Venetian blinds, so we may have an underwater look today, but the sun is shining and all is good. Commissioner Tavares, Registrar Piemonte, bravo on an exceptional job in the state primary on September 1st. As I said, you've got to mix every metaphor available. You guys were drinking from a fire hose, and you and your team deserve enormous credit. As you know, and perhaps those watching know, the purpose of this hearing really came from watching images out of the Wisconsin presidential primary at the end of April of this year, where you had what was typically 150 or so voting locations were diminished to fewer than 10 because they were unable to be staffed. You had people standing in line really at the nadir of the pandemic for hours on end. And even now we're seeing some exceptionally long lines for early votes in other states. So the purpose of this was to make sure that we were doing, could do, and would plan for every scenario imaginable as it relates to allowing people to vote safely, freely. Voting by mail was another sort of impetus driving force, and I've been really gratified to see the state following the lead of many in Boston in their calls for having more vote by mail opportunities, as well as an increased early voting, as well as obviously every safety protocol imaginable. So Commissioner, again, you and your team really did some great work. The purpose of this working session is just to see what changes will be coming down the pike for the November election. Obviously, I think we'll probably anticipate more than double turnout from what the state primary was, which was in and of itself an exceptionally healthy turnout, one of the highest primary turnouts, certainly in my lifetime and many others. Is also, I know my colleagues and I will have some questions on other safety protocols as it relates to simply making it easier and more efficient for more people to vote. But I didn't want to begin this working session without acknowledging, Commissioner, the great work of you and your team. It was an exceptionally difficult undertaking, and you did it with aplomb and grace, and you and your team should really be commended. So thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you're still muted, Madam.
Counselor Bach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am excited to be here today. I've been, appreciated all the work that went into September 1st election, as Councilor O'Malley said, and really excited about the proliferation of ballot drop boxes across the city. I know in my district, we've got them both at the central branch of the Copley Library and also out at the Parker Hill Library branch in Mission Hill. And obviously you can always drop off your ballot at City Hall and at loads of other locations that are posted online. So we're looking forward to those becoming available on Saturday until the election, and also to all the early voting, and especially excited about the opportunity to early vote in Fenway Park in my district on the 17th and 18th this weekend. So just really appreciate all this work. And I think, just the more we can do, I think it's great we're providing a plethora of options for ways for people to vote. I think in the midst of all that, people sometimes get confused. And so the more that we can use this hearing to focus in on how we spread the word about the ways for people to vote, and then thinking about how down the line we use this election and a really hard situation to learn how to make voting more accessible for everyone in every year. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Am I next, Madam Chair? I'll jump right in.
I'd go for it, Liz. I think you were next.
I'll go for it. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the folks at the Elections Department and Commissioner Tavares for all the great work. We are already seeing the fruits of your labours in the early preparation for the election. I just got this in the mail the other day about early voting locations and drop box locations, and a lot of the issues that we raised after the September 1st election, like the lack of not enough drop boxes, many of those issues that we brought up have already been addressed, and we're very, very happy with how things are going so far. And I look forward to getting an update. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you. Counselor Mejia.
Yes, good afternoon. Commissioner Tavares and Sabino and your whole crew, really looking forward to diving into this conversation, and to the sponsor for hosting us, and all formalities, blah, blah. But I think that just to get into the dive into what we're here to discuss, I'm just gonna focus a lot of my comments around how we're helping to support those who are incarcerated and making sure that we have a plan for them to participate in this election as well, one that is safe. And so while I know I could already see the eyebrows going up, that's probably not part of the conversation, but I'm just gonna like throw it in there anyways, just because I feel like it's a voice that is not included in this mix, and this is what I do. So I do have some questions specifically when we get to my opportunity to ask those questions, how we can help support this population. Thank you.
Just for a point of clarification to the commissioner, do folks currently who are incarcerated, do they have the right to vote in Massachusetts?
They are incarcerated for a non-felony conviction. Yes, they do have the right to vote.
If they're what? Say again?
If they're incarcerated for a non-felony conviction, then they can vote, yes.
Wonderful, thank you. Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you, and I just want to thank you for the work that you've done at the election department, where obviously there's a bunch of new things that they're not new ideas, but they're new to Massachusetts that we're trying, and I think we've done very well with the mail-in ballots in terms of how we pulled that off with the amount of time that we had to pull that off. And so thank you to the team that did that. Obviously, we're looking at numbers that I'm hoping are amongst the highest we've ever seen in an election this coming month. And so as we prepare for that, I'm just very interested in how we can help solidify and make this better and more accessible for folks to vote either from with a mail-in ballot or early vote in our neighborhoods. But that's kind of the angle I'm taking. But thank you for all the work that you've done on this, because it is not easy. Your staff has not grown, even as the ways to vote and the amount of voters coming in have. So thank you for the work you've done.
Councilor Asabi George has also joined us.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I apologize. I'm in the company of others. I just want to thank the chair for bringing this before us. Look forward to today's conversation. I think it's going to be certainly informative in thinking about what happened in September and how we can best prepare for the next couple of weeks. Thank you all.
Thank you. So without further ado, I think I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to the administration and allow for the commissioner to go ahead and do her presentation.
All right, thank you for inviting us to provide this update. There were, as you can imagine, a lot of lessons learned in September that will be applied to the November election. In September, the turnout was pretty impressive. We had a 35% turnout in September, so we are anticipating a higher turnout this go around. So we do appreciate any opportunity that we have to get the communication out there to the registered voters of Boston, so that we can counter any misinformation that is out there currently. So thank you for the opportunity.
So I guess we can go ahead and just start to ask questions. I didn't know if you had any presentation about registration levels, if you had any numbers for us in advance of November 3rd. I think
I do have numbers in terms of, I think registration is pretty much the same. We fell off a little bit, and then we picked up again. So we're at about 420,000 registered voters in the city of Boston. Previously, we had in September 91,072 requests for vote by mail ballots. And of those totals, we had 52,000 returned. Another 10,886 residents decided to show up in person during the early voting period, and 77,333 residents voted in person on election day. We are currently at 133,817 requests for vote by mail ballots, and we have mailed out 100,000 of those requests so far, and we'll be working diligently throughout the rest of the week to push the remaining ballots out. So that's where we are with the vote by mail piece right now. And we're also preparing for the start of early voting, which starts on Saturday, the 17th.
wonderful. And for folks, I'm sure we can post or at least state the website where they can track their ballot request. And also, if they wanted to find their polling place, we can, or I'm asking you to state if you have the websites off the top of your head, so folks could know.
It's trackmyballotma.com is where they want to log on to track their ballot. They can also request a vote by mail ballot via the Secretary of State's website now. So I believe it's myballotma.com, or they can simply log on to the Secretary of State's website. And that is something that it was just implemented right before the right before we started preparing for the November election. And if anyone's concerned about their request not getting to us, if they mailed the initial request and they see that we have not received it because there's no movement on the tracker, they can submit it electronically now. It will first prompt them to verify their voter registration. If someone's not already registered, that is a good opportunity for them to get registered and send in their request for a vote by mail ballot.
Okay. Well, to my colleagues, I'm going to go ahead and just turn it over then in order of arrival, starting with the lead sponsor. For any questions, suggestions, follow up from the last working session. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just for those watching, I would also encourage people to avail themselves to visit wheredoivote.ma.com if they're looking for their voting location. That's a good source as well. So, Commish, I have questions on the future, but just to sort of get things passed. So we had about 35% turnout in the primary, which was about, 130,000 or so voters, give or take?
Yes.
Great job. Again, that's highest for a primary that I've seen. I think it's probably safe to say that we could maybe not double that, but certainly get to the mid twos, 250, 275,000. I'm thinking as someone who's followed this for a while, which would be above a 60%, perhaps a 65% turnout in November, which would be astounding. And again, it shows the easier we make it for people, the more participatory government we will have, or truly participatory government. So of those 135, there are about 50,000 that were vote by, is that both vote by mail and absentee?
Yes, that were actually returned to us. So that was 59,200.
Okay.
We had 91,000 requests.
So about 2/3, that's pretty good, or very close to 2/3 were returned. And the thought is that people may have requested a ballot and then decided that they actually wanted to vote early or vote on election day, I assume.
That's correct. We did find on election day that was a little bit of a challenge in the morning. A lot of our election day voters were people who requested a ballot. So yes, and I imagine it's going to be the same thing for November. There are a lot of people who are anxious. We're trying to get the rest of the ballots out in the mail as early as possible. But I imagine come Saturday and Sunday, a lot of folks are going to take advantage of the early voting period.
So just so this is as much for my own edification as it is as a nerd who follows this stuff. If you request an absentee ballot, so everyone has been mailed now twice in some cases, an application for an absentee ballot. Every registered voter, every active registered voter has been mailed an application, right?
That's correct.
And if they send it back, then you will furnish them with a ballot. But if they decide not to fill out that ballot and send it in or drop it off, they will still have the ability to either vote early or vote on election day. So in that case, if an individual who has requested an absentee ballot but decides that he or she wants to vote in person, is there a little asterisk next to his or her name when they're signing in that a ballot has been requested but not returned?
That is correct. So anyone who's returned a ballot will be pre-marked on the voting list.
Just like with the, going back to typical absentee ballot, if you vote early, you get the little X and you can't vote twice. I mean, it's sort of a simple but fair system in place, so we don't have multiple voters. So were you able to cross-reference the number of people who requested an absentee ballot and weren't, of the 91,000 people who requested absentee ballots, not the 60,000 or nearly 60,000 who returned those ballots, but of those 31,000, do you know the percentage of those that actually voted then in person?
We haven't quite crunched those numbers yet. We haven't got there, but there is definitely a way to verify how many of those people have decided to vote in person.
Completely understand, Commish, you've got so much on your plate, but that is a question I will ask after the fact, because the point being, I think it is the best argument for us as a body to work to increase your budget so that you can hire more staff. And it proves the point, which I'm almost certain it will prove, which is why I'm asking this way, that the easier we make it for people to vote. So sending them ballots or applications for ballots, we are going to see a dramatic increase. So we can see of those, I would also look at the subset of those 91,000 applicants to see who wasn't a particularly strong voter before, who didn't vote regularly, because I think you will absolutely see that this is not only the right thing to do to preserve our democracy, but also will help get more people in. But it's one of the most impactful things we can do. So 60,000 voted by mail. How many voted early in the primary?
10,886.
Okay, so we'll say 11,000. Well, I'll say 10,000 for easy math. So that would be then 70,000. So about 65,000 ended up voting on election day. Is that right? At the poll.
77,000 voted on election day. So 77,000 voted on election day.
Okay, so it wasn't quite an even split, but for all intents and purpose, it is fair to say that because of these three options for voting, roughly half of the voters voted in person on election day, and the other half either voted early or voted by mail. With not an exact split, but we're talking about 70 versus 77,000 or so.
Yeah.
And then I guess we would possibly think those numbers would hold true for November, other than the fact that the weather is going to be colder and we are seeing an uptick in cases. So perhaps we might see the pendulum shift a little bit with more people voting early and voting by mail.
That's correct. And we have an additional week this time around for early voting. So we have an additional weekend and another full week of early voting.
Okay. And how many, so just as folks know, how many ballots did you say we've sent out for the final election, for the November election?
We have a total of 133, almost 134,000 requests. Of those requests, a little over 100,000 have been mailed.
That's fantastic. So you're also well ahead of the game of where you were pre-primary in terms of getting the ballots out to people. Now we're 3 weeks ahead. So in how long can individuals request a vote by mail or absentee ballot?
They have until October 28th at 5 p.m.
Okay, and 28th.
That falls on a Wednesday.
And early voting is slated to begin this weekend?
That's correct.
And it's now 2 weeks as opposed to 1 week?
That's correct. So early voting will start on the 17th and run through October 30th. We have 10 sites going in the community both Saturday and Sunday. Then the following weekend we'll rotate sites and we'll have an additional 10 sites going both Saturday and Sunday. City Hall will be the main early voting location Monday through Friday with late options on Tuesday and Thursday. And then we'll have a couple of additional sites in the community going on Tuesdays and Thursdays as well.
Okay. And in addition to voting early, an individual can drop off his or her vote by mail ballot at these early voting sites during their hours of operation, right?
That is correct.
And in addition to that, I think perhaps Councilor Edwards or Councilor Bach had referenced this, there will be additional drop-off locations for these vote by ballots as well, vote by mail ballots.
That's correct. We have expanded our ballot drop boxes across the city. So we've included 15 additional boxes for a total of 17. 2 of those boxes will be available here at City Hall, one on the outside on the 3rd floor, and the other one will be on the Congress Street side, outside and accessible 24/7. The other 15 locations are going to be mainly at Boston Public Library locations. They will be stationed outside and accessible 24/7. They will also be monitored by 24-hour surveillance. We have one site in Rosendale that will be at a BCYF site simply because the library there is under construction. So we tried to be consistent about the location that we are using, and they are going to be accessible outdoors so that it's a contactless method for them to return their ballot. They don't have to go into a building if anyone has any COVID related concerns about going into a building.
And when you say 24 hours, sorry, just last question, I'm sorry. 24-hour surveillance, is that camera, closed circuit cameras?
That's correct.
Okay, that's it for this round. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Councilor Bach?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to, I understand when somebody comes to vote with and has that mark that they requested a ballot, this is in person on election day. we talked to the first hearing in August about the need for that phone call downtown to like check whether or not their ballot had come in. And I know that was a little bit of an issue, and I'm just thinking about the fact that we're going to have higher volume. And I was wondering kind of how you guys are preparing to make sure that if we have to have that phone calling step, that we've got enough capacity to have it not be a source of delay at our sites.
So that was one of the lessons from the September primary that did cause an issue in the morning. And we were getting a backlog of phone calls, and lines were forming at the locations because everyone was calling in here. So we did double check with the Secretary of State's office that it was okay to forego that process. So we won't be requiring that process, but that procedure, there will be checks and balances on the back end here. Should we receive someone's ballot, we will hold on to it so that we can cross-reference the books on election day, just to ensure that someone hasn't in fact voted in person before we count the ballot.
Got it. So if a ballot comes in late enough that it wouldn't be marked on the poll checkers, then you're going to segregate those and hold them just until you have a chance to compare the two lists. Okay, that makes a ton more sense to me. Yeah, I had concerns in August about that piece of the puzzle, so glad to hear it's been moved away. And then I guess another question, one thing I heard from poll workers on the day was that you had people coming in with, to drop off their ballots at polling sites thinking they could do that and finding out they couldn't. And when it was the person themselves, it was totally fine because they could just spoil the ballot and cast a new one on the site if it was their polling place, right? But that we had situations where people were bringing the ballots of their family members in their respective envelopes. And of course, the family member is not there to vote. And so I find myself wondering whether we might want to kind of proactively prepare a map and guidance for our poll workers about these are the nearest drop boxes to your location. Because obviously in September, the only drop box was City Hall. But I feel like if that happened in a Mission Hill polling place, like if someone comes to the Tobin Community Center with their ballot on election day, I want the poll worker to say, you can't give that to me here, but you can drop it at the library around the corner, right? And there's a ballot box there. I just know that was an issue with our communities.
I think that is an excellent suggestion. Our poll worker trainings have not started yet, so that is definitely something that we can include and include it with their materials. So thank you for that suggestion. We will definitely use that one.
Great, awesome. It's just here to help. So yeah, I think, and I mean, I guess the only other question I have is just when you think, I mean, I know you said we're working all flat out this week. Do you think that by the end of this week or the beginning of next, when do you think we'll have that other 33,000 cleared? Because there's a lot of anxiety around this election. You're hearing it, we're hearing it. People who don't have their ballots yet are saying to me, when is it coming?
Oh, we're aiming for the end of this week. So
by Friday.
Yes.
Okay, that's great to hear. Madam Chair, I think those are my questions for now.
Thank you. Councillor Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question about, and my colleagues have already asked many of my questions. If you mail your ballot in and it doesn't arrive before election day, how late will your ballot be considered and counted if you mail it in, it arrives on or after election day?
So any ballots postmarked by November 3rd will be accepted up until November 6th. So as long as it gets here by the 6th, we will count that ballot.
Okay. I think that's all I have. My colleagues have asked my other questions, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mejia. Councillor Mejia. I don't know if we have a connection issue. I do know one of the questions she did lead with was about those who are currently incarcerated and efforts the office is making to make sure that their voices are heard as well.
Well, because it is a legislative issue, there's not really much that we can do in terms of that. We pre-COVID, there were a lot of advocacy groups that worked close with the prisons, and they would go into the prison and actually request absentee ballot or help them fill out absentee ballot requests. We can't just proactively send ballots without an initial request. I know that, is it Pastor, can't remember his name off the top of my head. I know that he's been doing a lot of work with Sheriff Thompson to make sure that they can get to into some of these prisons and help these individuals request absentee ballots. But aside from that, we need to have the request from every individual before we can distribute any ballots.
Okay, so essentially for those who are currently incarcerated, there needs to be a direct request to you. And there are nonprofits that are working to get those requests out and done. But I know that, for example, I had Secretary of State sent a request, if you will, to my house. Is there a drop off at all for houses of incarceration?
A drop off and
we all received kind of pre-applications in the mail. I did. I think Liz Braden did. And so there are many of us who are not incarcerated who received pre-application.
Okay. So the applications for vote by mail. I imagine it includes every single registered voter. So if someone's registered from the prison, they may have, but that's a question directly for them, since the mailer came from them, as to whether or not they included anyone registered at a prison in their mailing.
Otherwise, it would have gone to their home address.
If they're registered from their home address, yes. So you can register from the prison using the address for the prison, or you can register using your home address and just have the ballot mailed to the prison. So it would depend on where that voter was actually registered.
Okay. Councilor Mejia, I know this is your questioning, and I don't know if we lost you. I'll check. Cindy, if you got bumped. I know she's been accidentally bumped somehow before. So I hope I did your questioning justice. So Councilor Arroyo and then Councilor Sabi George.
So many of my questions have already been asked. So I really am just asking in terms of, I'm getting a lot of calls from constituents about if I get my ballot, like what's the drop off date that I should stop requesting my ballot or trying to find it. If I don't have it in my mailbox by this day, I should make steps to early vote or vote in person. What is the date for that? I know that we're counting ballots up until 3 days later, but is there a cutoff date for when, if you don't have a mail-in ballot in your mailbox, you should just cancel that and go vote early or vote on election day? Is there a day we're telling people to do that?
I would say don't wait. As long as you have additional options, you should utilize one of those options. So I would say don't wait until the last minute. Obviously, November 3rd, election day, is everyone's very last resort for voting, but I wouldn't wait until election day. If there's concerns with your mail-in ballot, take advantage of the early voting period. And if you're adamant about not going into the location, you can wait, and just know that election day is your last opportunity to cast the ballot.
Okay, so that, I guess, is there no cutoff date for when, if you don't have a ballot to go? Because the issue I have is one specific constituent, for instance, that wouldn't do much for is somebody who is not gonna be in the city around that time. Normally they would request an absentee ballot, but they're asked for a mail-in ballot. So the question is, if they get the mail-in ballot by a certain date, what date would they have to then cancel plans and come in and vote in person?
We are messaging that everyone should give themselves 7 days.
Perfect. Thank you.
Especially with the mailing system, you want to make sure that it's 7 days before. Put it in the mail 7 days. Even though we're accepting ballots postmarked by November 3rd, I would just encourage everyone not to wait that late.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. We have Councilor Sabi George. Then I do know Mass Vote. Alex from Mass Vote is here, and I will turn it over to him. It looks like we've just been joined by Councilor Flaherty. And I think, and I'm not sure, there's a Mr. Tom Reddy also might be in the public who may have also some questions or some comments. So that'll complete our whole round then. We'll go to Councillor Sabi George, then Councillor Flaherty, who just joined. We'll hit up the two mass vote, and then and Councillor Flynn is just joined as well. We'll get through the councillors, get through, the mass vote comments, and if Mr. Reddy or anybody from the public has a comment, then we'll go through the second round. Is that okay, Councillor O'Malley?
That's lovely. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Excellent. Councillor Sabi George.
Thank you again, Madam Chair, and thank you to Councillor O'Malley for hosting this really important discussion around voting during this time, voting during a pandemic, thinking about the presidential election and some of the ballot initiatives that are before us this year. For me, it's about access to voting and that we aren't limiting anyone's ability to vote when they need to and how they need to vote safely, and that we're able to share the information properly with all of our residents across the city of Boston in particular. So I don't think I have any additional questions. I think that those asked by my colleague and sort of led by the lead sponsor here, Councillor O'Malley. I'm grateful for his leadership in this space and for the questions and comments from my colleagues. So that's it for me, just sort of an interest in a heightened awareness around increasing and making sure that we have access, that our residents are safe when they vote and have that, it's a safe process, and that they have the information they need in order to fully participate in our election coming up. So thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the maker.
Thank you. Councillor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the lead sponsor. Just want to take the opportunity to give a shout out and a thank you, obviously, to the commissioner and her team, particularly Sabino Piemonte. I know during the primary, I was out and about and identified and received calls from constituents with respect to some conditions that really around the polling locations, particularly those that were sort of thrust into making the change at the last minute. And as a result of which his prompt and appropriate attention, those matters were addressed, and folks are excited and looking forward to voting in person at the polls in November. So thanks to Sabino and his team, and I know he coordinated some other departments as well to make the necessary improvements around some of the polling locations, making them safer, et cetera. That's number one. And two, I do have a couple constituents that their concern is that they had requested a mail-in ballot, and the last response they had received was the website says it's been saying pending, in quotes, pending for weeks. And they're a little nervous. I know we still get a few weeks left to go, but obviously this vote is important to them. So what can I tell folks that several weeks ago have requested a mail-in ballot as to when they will receive that ballot? And in one particular instance, I believe they had directed that ballot to their parents' home. I believe it was up in New Hampshire because of their work schedule. They did not want to lose the ballot, so they want to make sure that that ballot arrived safely. They had concerns about what they were reading and reports that they were seeing in more of the national news with respect to some of the mailed out ballots not getting there, et cetera, and turning up in parks and muddy rivers, et cetera. So I guess the question is what's the protocol right now? If we continue to get phone calls from constituents that have asked for a ballot, a mail-in ballot, and they still haven't received it, when do they really need to start hitting the panic button prior to the election?
If they haven't received their ballot by next week, then I would say hit the panic button. Again, all ballots are not out yet, which is why they see pending in the tracker. There's multiple steps to it, so and it's a lot of manual work. So in addition to just stuffing envelopes and instructions and then the ballot, we still have to, after we mail out these ballots, we still have to scan them before voters can actually see it in the tracker, which is why they see pending. We are going to be pushing for the rest of the ballots to be mailed by Friday. So I would say by next week, midweek, if they haven't seen any movement in the tracker, then they can give us a call.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner, and let us know what we as councilors can do to sort of help you in your department in the weeks ahead. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the lead sponsor, Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Edwards, and thank you, Councilor O'Malley, for your work on this important issue. I want to say thank you to the Commissioner and Sabino as well, and the election department team for dedication, hard work, and professionalism, especially during this difficult time. Apologize for being late. I was on another call on a cleanup issue in my district. But what's important to me is making sure that the voting location is safe, accessible to everybody, especially persons with disabilities, our immigrant neighbors. It's welcoming to our immigrant neighbors. And, language access is also a critical part of elections. I'm the vice chair of civil rights with Councilor Mejia, who is the chair, and we take this issue very seriously. Voting rights is a civil rights issue. So I just want to highlight the tremendous work on the election department of being responsive. And there's more work that we want to do on this issue. And I also want to highlight the early voting at District Hall. I know it's a great addition, and the residents of Fort Point in the South Boston waterfront. Tom Reddy's on this call, but they're very happy about it. So again, I want to say thank you to Commissioner. Thank you to Councilor Edwards and Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you. At this point, before we go back through the counselors again, we're gonna go to, I think there was a public testimony, or at least a Mass Vote may want to comment from Alex from Mass Vote. And I'm not sure if Tom Reddy also had a comment, but I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, sorry about I was a little confused, but I just submitted some written testimony. So if you guys want to take a look at that, you're more than welcome to. And my email's on there. So if you have any questions from the advocate perspective, I'm happy to answer those as well.
I actually forgot to ask my one question, and that was, did you have any complaints or any issues with people being asked to wear masks? Was there any pushback? I'm just curious in general how polite Bostonians were on the primary day.
I think overall they did pretty well. We didn't have a lot of issues, and our poll workers were very well trained on how to handle the situation. So all in all, no complaints.
That's good to know. I'm very happy that people didn't add any additional stress on our volunteers. People forget that they're volunteers who are working very hard on election day and throughout. And then Tom, I wasn't sure if you wanted to say anything before we go back to counselors. He does. Okay. Go ahead, Tom. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Counselor. Most of my questions have been addressed. I did want to also thank the Commissioner for considering an early voting location in the South Boston waterfront, as Councilor Flynn had mentioned. So that's clearly the neighborhood appreciates that. I do have a question as it relates to poll observers or watchers, I guess, whatever the official term is. How many per precinct and/or how many per poll can be allowed in the particular polling location on voting day and early voting, I guess, but clearly on November 3rd. I'm just trying to understand if that's going to be a stressful event with numerous poll observers or watchers in there watching the process. It's something that typically isn't seen across the city, and it could potentially add some an interesting dynamic that's typically not there. That was my primary question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. I don't know, Commissioner, if you wanted to address that.
So there is no set limit. The way we're training our election officers until we get any further guidance on this is just to perhaps rotate the observers. There are capacity limits in some of our spaces, so it depends on the size of the voting location. So they may have to have some observers just take turns and rotate observation during the day.
Thank you. Councilor Mejia, I think we had called you and we kind of went through the discussion on those who are incarcerated, but I see you're back. So if you wanted to ask any questions.
Yes, I'm sorry. I got a call from my daughter's school. even though it's remote learning, there's still things that I need to, so sorry about my disappearing act here. But, and I do have a few questions, and I'm sure that I heard through the grapevine that Edwards has always had my back and asked some of these questions, but just in case, I just wanted to ask whether or not, some of the things that I've been hearing from folks is that we need to allow folks who are incarcerated to be able to utilize Boston as a place of their residency, because many of our folks who are behind the walls usually don't have a place of residency that they can put on the ballot. So just want to advocate that this is something that the state allows and that the city should support in allowing people to utilize their address of incarceration on their ballot. And then the other piece that I'm curious about, with 20 days until elections, we need to provide absentee ballots, applications, and materials on candidates and deadlines to every incarcerated eligible voter. And I'm not sure who or how, if that is happening at all. And then if not, then I'm just curious if we can make that happen, and what would that look like to do that here in Boston. And then we're wondering if we can coordinate. The sheriff's department is going to see what this will look like, but to be able to make a concerted and coordinated effort, that once those ballots are ready for pickup, that could be a pickup location, that someone from your department can go to the House of Corrections and pick up the ballot boxes. I don't know, something needs to happen to ensure that these ballots get counted and submitted. And I believe that is all I'm going to give you right now.
Thank you. Commissioner?
We have provided absentee ballot applications to Pastor Franklin Hobbs has been working with Sheriff Thompson to get into the prisons to get these individuals registered for a vote by mail ballot. And we do currently allow them to register using the address from the prison, but in terms of drop boxes or even ballot boxes, I know that's something that Pastor Hobbs has been working to advocate for, which may be a little bit of a challenge because we cannot have voting machines outside of the precinct. So I'm not sure how that would look. That is going to have to be a legislative change.
So I was on so Pastor Hobbs is who I've been working with, and the sheriff on this. So this is why I'm bringing it up into this space. And you know how we have drop boxes in like the libraries and where people can drop off their ballots, right? Or is there a way for us to do something similar just for the prisons?
Again, these are all legal issues because ballots are supposed, unless it's an absentee ballot, which is actually what they'll have to be.
That's what I'm saying, these absentee ballots, can we make it easier for the transition from one place to the next so that those who are incarcerated can have their votes counted?
These are all legislative issues because with absentee ballots, it says that either the voter, it has to be mailed back or returned by a household member or a family member. So there's a lot of things surrounding that are legal things before we know whether or not we can actually place a drop box for incarcerated individuals.
Commissioner, if I may, and Councilor Mejia, if I may, the question as I understand it is there possible to have a drop box in front of, let's say, the Suffolk County House of Corrections, as you've put in front of libraries? Is it possible to put one also in front of any House of Corrections in Boston, by virtue of the fact, not only for those who are in the House of Corrections, but their family members coming to visit them who may want to also, drop off their vote as well? Did I maybe characterize the question correctly or no?
Yeah, I think that's why everybody needs a Lydia on their team, because Councilor Edwards always knows how to get my point across in a way that people can understand it. Yes, that is exactly what I'm trying to articulate. Thank you for the translation, Councilor Edwards. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, Commissioner, thank you.
If it's for the November election, for at this stage in the game, then no, it's not possible to put a drop box. But there's nothing that says or limits where we can place drop boxes.
So, so it seems like we just as a city decided not to put the drop boxes there, but we could have had them there in front of the House of Corrections.
We went based on the guidelines set forth by the Secretary of State, because there is nothing really governing drop boxes. We, at the bare minimum, decided to follow their guidelines, which was placing drop boxes at city-owned locations that individuals were familiar with, that would be under surveillance all 24 hours. So in trying to identify a location or city-owned locations that people frequent and people are familiar with, we decided to go with Boston Public Libraries for consistency and messaging.
Well, I don't know, Councilor Mejia, if you had a follow-up, but I definitely would encourage the city to consider House of Correction as a very secure place with 24-hour monitoring. For too many of our families, it is a very familiar place. They visit their loved ones there regularly, every weekend, every holiday, every day, as those their work schedules will allow for. It is a place for a lot of children. It's a place for a lot of families to come. And while there might be the issue of whether the Boston residents are all technically coming there who are voting, they are Boston residents if they choose to be registered in that House of Correction. So one thing that I think, and I appreciate this truly, Councilor Mejia, you bringing this up and bringing this to there, that's a decision I hope the Elections Department will correct in the future. This isn't a massive election, police reform, incarceration, all on the ballot. And I think one of the places where we could have absolutely have had a drop box. Thank you, Councilor Mejia, for that comment and thoughts, line of questioning. So I just wanted to note that. Is it really, there's no way we can put a drop box out there at all?
It's going to be, it was really challenging getting the drop boxes that, to be in place by Saturday, and to get additional drop boxes because there's such a high demand. It's going to be very challenging.
Could we rise to the occasion for that challenge? I think it's a matter of civil rights. I think it is what you're hearing yourself. Councilor Mejia, go ahead.
I mean, it's one box. I mean, I don't know look, I'm going to be 100%. I don't know. I understand his laws and I don't want to break any of them, especially live on YouTube right now. But I do think that we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to really step up in a way that really shows that regardless of what, we talk about second chances, and we can't even give people an opportunity to vote. In the city of Boston, and how are we really serious about removing barriers if people who are living these realities can't even vote for utilize their voice. And so I think that it's 20 days from now. I'm sure that there's some magic that you can work with. I don't know, maybe Mayor Walsh got some friends up in the State House still that he can make a few phone calls and call William Gallivan, that commissioner, whatever he is, the Secretary of State. So let's do something. I think that this is one of those things like, let's figure it out and let's be aggressive about removing these barriers. It's 20 days, it's one drop box. It is an effort that is worth us fighting for.
I will definitely look into what our options are and get back to everyone about this drop box.
Thank you.
I'll volunteer to help you. I'll drive it if I have to. Just let me know what I need to do. I'm here for all of it. Thank you.
I'll keep that in mind.
Thank you. Just to echo, and I'm sure my colleagues will as well, we're excited to lead the state in this. We might be the first, if not maybe one of the few drop boxes outside of an incarceration, an institute of incarceration. So I hope Boston does lead, and I hope we can demonstrate that we can provide one more resource. Going back now through second round of questions from my colleagues and comments, Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll get into my comments more on sort of some of the safety precautions, but just to sort of follow up that conversation, having worked in the Sheriff's Department for Sheriff Andre Cabral for a number of years about the South Bay House of Correction and Nashua Street Jail, which are two correctional facilities in Boston. I certainly agree for calls to make it easier for inmates and detainees to have an opportunity to vote. I think maybe the issue that perhaps the commissioner may be given some pause is it's not as though one drop box in the lobby of South Bay, for example, would be accessible by individuals who are in the different units. It's not as though they would be able to access it personally. So while I certainly think it's a noble goal, looking at a more concentrated effort on getting applications and sort of the vote by mail through the traditional means to folks who are living in South Bay currently, I think is another tool that we should not lose sight of. Is a great way to get more participation from individuals who currently are at South Bay. So that's just my 2 cents on that. Back to the preparedness. How were our staffing levels for the September 1st primary, Commissioner Tavares? How many individuals did we hire for the, sort of these one day or however they're classified temporary employees to help facilitate the elections?
We did hire approximately 1,800 election officers to serve on September 1st. We did find that a number of those individuals did not serve because they were experiencing some sort of symptom, and we asked that anyone who had any symptoms stayed home. For the November election, we are currently at 2,062 poll workers, which is pretty impressive, and I don't think I've ever seen staffing numbers that high, which is great. We are going to continue to staff just in anticipation for anyone who may fall off before election day, just in case someone gets sick, so that we are very well staffed and we have people to pull from in case we need to reassign someone to a different precinct.
And that's fabulous news. What was the sort of retention rate going into? Does that 1,800 figure for the primary include the individuals who were working the early vote locations and election day, or just election day?
That was just election day.
Okay. What about early vote? I assume we're hiring a lot. You're just not all doing that in-house. You couldn't.
We do have almost 300 individuals assigned to early voting, but a lot of that is just repeat people. They'll be working the same 2 days, or they'll be working here at City Hall every day.
I gotcha. And so are we currently looking for more individuals to hire, or do you feel confident with our staffing levels? That was an issue at our last working session before the primary.
We do feel confident with our staffing levels, and we do have a lot of applicants to kind of select from. So we will continue to staff based on the applicants that we have right now. We simply can't reach everyone that we have in our applicants pool, which is, I think, over 7,000 applicants at this point.
Wow. Why do you, I mean, that's an amazing figure, because I know that was a real concern at our hearing in May and then our follow-up working session in August, that we wouldn't be able to get the participation, but that's fantastic. So we don't have to speculate on that. That's good news. If I think Councillor Flynn and Flaherty perhaps touched upon this, the changes to locations, are there any additional changes to locations between the 12 or 13 that were cited back, or that took place before the September primary? Any additional changes in voting locations?
There are no additional changes, and anyone who was affected by the change in September will be reminded of that change ahead of the November election.
Okay, great. In terms of early vote locations, if I love baseball and love old ballparks, and particularly 106 or 107-year-old ballparks, and I want to early vote, what should I do?
You should definitely take advantage of early voting at Fenway Park on Saturday the 17th and Sunday the 18th. Voting will be available from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. So yes, it is a great opportunity. The Red Sox opened up their doors to the voters of Boston, and we decided to take advantage of the opportunity. So we hope that everyone will take advantage of it as well.
Good. And then finally, can you talk a little bit sort of about some more of the safety precautions? I'm talking about, my wife and I went to early vote and we were handed a brand new pen, and they're sanitized, and there were just talk about, run us through briefly for this round, and this will be my last question, on just the safety precautions when an individual shows up to either early vote or vote on election day, how it's going to be different for him or her.
Well, first and foremost, everyone's going to be encouraged to wear a face covering. We will have posted signs in multiple languages reminding voters that they should be wearing a face covering. Our election officers are going to continue to receive PPE kits that include face shields, face masks, hand sanitizer, disinfectant spray, gloves. Our voting booths are going to be limited to 2 marking shelves as opposed to 4. They're going to be spaced out 6 feet apart and placed as close to the entrance as possible in order to limit the path of travel for the voter. We're going to remind voters to social distance. So we will have an election officer making sure they do line management and reminding voters constantly that they should social distance. So, and we also, in addition to all of that, we reminding our poll workers to clean, but we have cleaning crews assembled that will go out into every single polling location with electrostatic guns and disinfect the location every 2 to 3 hours. That's something that did work very well for the September election, and we will continue it for the general election as well.
And then I guess this will be my last question. In terms of sort of other safety, obviously this is a very high charged election. I would argue that the Republican candidate for re-election to the presidency is encouraging bad and dangerous behavior from many of his supporters. Is there any concern about safety? Granted, Boston isn't considered a battleground city and Massachusetts isn't considered a battleground state, so perhaps this wouldn't be as big of a concern in some other places, but are there some sort of public safety concerns given the volatility of this race right now? And have you had conversations with public safety professionals, just sort of anticipatory? I had asked Mayor Walsh this question on a call he had with some electeds on elections as well, so you were on that call. So I'm curious, any thoughts you can share?
We have been working with BPD to ensure that they typically are available and on hand, but just making sure that our police officers who are stationed here, they keep them on for the rest of the night, just in case any civil unrest should arise. We are working with emergency management as well. We will be activating their command center for election day, just in anticipation for anything that may arise throughout the day.
Okay, we'll stay tuned on that. That's it for this round. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry, you're still muted, Madam Chair, but.
I'm sorry. Councillor Bach. If Councillor Bach had to leave, then we'll go to Councillor Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had you mentioned, Commissioner, that you are stuffing envelopes and that there's a huge number of requests for mail-in ballots. And I'm just wondering about your staffing capacity at City Hall, and looking forward to, historically looking back to previous elections and then looking forward to future elections. I'm thinking about budget implications for your department to be able to handle this extra workload with increased voter participation, which is a fabulous thing. But just how are you doing with staffing and any anticipated increased budget needs going forward?
I think we are doing okay in terms of our budget. We do have 12 seasonal hires currently working for us. It worked out well because we were not able to utilize any of our seasonal positions over the summer because of COVID. So we were able to hire individuals to come in and help with the election. We have election officers who are not only helping on election day, they're here helping us stuff ballots as well. And we do have staff members coming from other city agencies, so individuals who may be working from home or scheduled to work from home on certain days are actually coming in here to assist. And we will take as many people as we can to get all these ballots out the door by Friday. So if you know someone who is willing to volunteer, we're happy to have them. We also have volunteers from the legal department here in the election office actually stuffing ballots right now. So everyone's helping.
All hands on deck.
That's right.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mejia.
Thank you again. So I just have a few questions about communication and engagement in terms of like where the new ballot drop boxes are and what languages we're reaching out in. I know that I did see a long list of all of the places across the city, and we've shared that on our socials. I'm just trying to still determine whether or not you have it in multiple languages. I haven't seen that communication in multiple languages yet. And if you have it, if someone could email it to me, that would be great. I haven't seen any multiple languages for where these drop box locations are in different languages.
We will share the flyer. The early voting mailer that went out is in multiple languages. And we also have the electronic file that you can use for sharing. So we'll definitely send that over.
And then, you know, a lot of people already feel mistrust in the government, right? And they might be really skeptical of any changes to the electoral process. I'm just curious what is being done to communicate any changes or considerations made by the elections department. Yeah, I'm just curious about what your communication has been to the general public about what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and how safe it is.
So we have been working closely with the communications team here in the city. They are assisting with constantly monitoring our social media accounts to answer any questions. If someone has if there's misinformation out there, they're trying to counter it via press releases. We've done a number of press releases to address the voting options this year. And if anyone has a concern with perhaps their ballot not getting here on time or not seeing movement on the tracker, that's something that we've been trying to constantly communicate, having posts on our social media account, but also on the city social media account because the city has a larger number of followers. So we've been trying a variety of ways to get information. Again, we did conduct a mailing of the early voting locations and the voting options to every single household. Everyone should be receiving those mailers if they haven't already received it. And it spells out all of the voting options, all of Dropbox locations. If someone has a concern, drop it off at your early voting location, Dropbox location, and things of that nature.
That's great. And one last question, this is not even around safety. I'm just curious about signage. You know, those signs, vote today, the ones that you usually put out all over the city. I'm just curious if it would be possible for this time to have more signs across different parts of the city, because I know certain neighborhoods have more signage than others. Having run citywide, I got to be in all 22 neighborhoods during election, and I could see the difference in terms of equity and in terms of like Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, East Boston, Hyde Park. In terms of visual signage, I saw more in other parts of the city. And I know that, and I'm not sure if the signage is based on the number of voters that turn out in those neighborhoods. And that's probably why there's more signage in those spaces, because that's where usually the turnout is. And then you just want to reach more people. But I'm just curious and what opportunities exist to put more signage in lower voter turnout spaces so that we can increase the turnout.
I think our goal is usually to place them in high traffic area, but I can see what we have available for signage. If any, I'm assuming you're talking about the sandwich boards that we usually put out. I can see what we have available if it's possible to get some more out, but we may have everything that is in our possession already out on the streets.
Yeah, and that's why Commissioner Tavares, I'm so excited that I went through this first year of learning, because next year's for the budget cycle, y'all, I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna go hard and making sure that you all have the resources and the support that you need to be able to do this work. This should be a priority for the city. The fact that you got to work whatever little sandwich boxes you have is just crazy at this point, right? And I think that our values is definitely a value statement, and we need to ensure that you have the tools and the budget that you need to really do what you envision for your department. So I just want you to know that I see you and I appreciate you, and I'm gonna go hard for y'all next year, just so you know. And I
Thank
put
you.
this out and it's recorded, so people can play it back if I don't, but I got you.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I think Councilor Arroyo had to jump, and Councilor Asabi George as well may have had to leave. Up next would be Councilor Flaherty, who I think is also gone. So Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards, and again, thanks to Councilor Edwards and Councilor O'Malley, to the commissioner and her team at the election department. Commissioner, do we have enough translators working the polls that speak various languages, or is there still a need to get more volunteers to help out?
We currently do have a good number. I don't know what the breakdown is per precinct, but it also depends on the actual location. So depending on what the location is, we would identify what the language needs are in that particular area and then staff accordingly. And I know right now we're doing pretty well, and that's something that we will continue to review to make sure that we're well staffed come election day. And in addition to that, we are going to keep our election day phone bank staffed with interpreters here in the office. So we'll have a variety of languages assigned here in the election department where people can call for translation services.
That's good to know. Thank you, Commissioner. And my final question, I know obviously all the voting locations will be ADA compliant, but are there any other concerns that persons with disabilities might have in terms of navigating the voting booth, whether it's the sidewalk out front or it's the crosswalk nearby? Are there any challenges that you have, you or your team have heard about?
We have not heard of any challenges. However, we do train all of our election officers. We created an accessibility training video that just covers how to assist individuals with a disability. And we are constantly reminding them and encouraging them, especially for the locations that have separate accessible entrances, to staff someone at that location to make sure that voters can access that door at all times, and just making sure they know what the proper etiquette is for speaking with someone with a disability, and what type of assistance is available and how they can be of assistance to these voters.
If we do notice a infrastructure challenge for persons with disabilities, would we notify, prior to that, would we notify Public Works and Transportation, maybe to see what last minute infrastructure improvements, even temporary, that they would make?
Yes, but we do have constant meetings, and actually I have one coming up very soon with all of our stakeholders. So it includes Public Works, transportation to make sure that any construction or any issues with sidewalks or anything of that nature is addressed before Election Day.
Excellent. My friend is the Commissioner of Persons with Disabilities, Commissioner McCaw, so should be a great asset as part of the working group. She would have excellent recommendations as well. So maybe you might want to check in with her and her team. So I'm sure you have already.
Yeah, she's actually part of our election advisory committee.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Councilor O'Malley. Thank you, Councilor Edwards.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. We've been joined by our youngest or newest constituent on the council. Margot, how are you? Is she sleeping?
I'm ostensibly supposed to burp her, but I think this is just going to be a little rest, so don't mind us.
Okay. So I just had two just follow up, and then we're going to go through for final remarks. Commissioner, I understand we went from 2 drop boxes to 17 for the general, so that's a huge jump. And I'm just hoping, again, I wanted to echo what Councilor Mejia said. What's the average cost of a drop box, and how do we get to the point where we get 50 of these around the city? every election?
There are, they were about $3,000 each. And 50 drop boxes across the city. The challenge is going to be securing all of those drop boxes at 8 p.m. on election day. Not only do I have to identify a secure way for someone to retrieve all of those ballots on a daily basis so that we're accountable for every single drop box, but someone has to man that drop box on election day by 8 p.m., lock it so that it cannot accept any other ballots, and then transport those ballots back here to City Hall.
I recognize the challenge. I definitely think, again, as Councilor Mejia said, I echo the resources that you will need to be. I would love for you to, when the budget time comes around, for you to explain what those resources are. So for the additional 23 that we need, if we have 17 now, I'm assuming they're not going anywhere. We need about what, $69,000 more just for the drop boxes, and then there's security and location and all of those different things. And I hope that if it's staff that you need to help identify, or if it's just a study that you need to have done to make sure that we're clear about how by November 2021, our election, right, for all of my colleagues and the mayor, that we are demonstrating that we've done everything that we can to make it as simple as possible for folks to vote. So I really look forward to that, and I hope that I know my colleagues will join Councilor Mejia in pushing for the infrastructure and the dollars to make sure that's happening. And I just, again, appreciate your looking into the possibility of having a drop box outside the House of Correction, even if it is just for the final 10 days, and trying to come up with a place. I think it reminds people to vote. It reminds people that, this is a place, if we're trying to meet people where they are, like we are doing with the libraries, we are doing with other public facilities, BCYF, things like that. People are there, and not just inside, but coming to visit people. So I think it's a great way of demonstrating that they are seen and not forgotten, as Councilor Mejia noted. So we're going to go through now for final remarks. We'll start again with the lead sponsor, and we'll just go through and finish. Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you to all my colleagues who participated. This is the most important election of our lifetime. That has been said countless times in years past. This time it's actually true. Doing everything we can to ensure that as many people are able to vote safely amid pandemic, easily during other barriers that clearly exist to voting, to tackle those. I really want to see Boston become a leader or continue to be a leader in this space. We had enormous turnout on what otherwise was seen as a very low, likely a low turnout election last month. And I think that both speaks to the civic spirit that is alive and well in the city and the great work that you have done, Commissioner. So we stand ready, willing, and able. I think you've heard from countless of our colleagues talking about how as we get into next year's budget, it's important that you have the resources that you need. Because if we can, I'd love us to get to 70% in this important presidential election. And then by God, I want us to keep at that level or increase it in municipal elections, in off-year elections, in every election going forward. Same-day voter registration is something that we need to do. Automatic voter registration is something that we need to do. Looking at this increased access for voting, not only the early vote sites, but the vote by mail are great steps in the right direction, having those access points to as many people as possible. I know you agree with that. I know we all agree with that. It's going to take the political will and the muscle to make it done, but I'm certain that we can. So looking forward to, we called the hearing initially, had a working session before the primary, had this. I would like it with the chair's agreement that we could maybe do a sort of retrospective after the November election. We'll give you a couple of weeks to catch up on sleep because I know how hard you're working, but just to sort of look in again, what way it can be an informal working session like this where we just look what went well, what we can work on in the future. But again, I will close with the way I began by saying that you and your team did a remarkable job, and we're very, very grateful for your leadership and your work in this vitally important area. So thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Sabino, to your team. Take care.
Thank you. Councillor Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to echo Councillor O'Malley's comments. and thank the commissioner and her team for all the hard work. I think they did an amazing job in September. I'm hopeful and hopeful that this is going to go well. I am very grateful for this advanced mailing with information about early voting and drop boxes, etc. It's answered many of the questions that our constituents were asking in the run-up to the last election, and hopefully they'll be answered this time. And they will be more familiar with the process this time as well. I think to stress my colleagues' comments about the budget, I think it's really important that your department is well staffed and well funded to meet the challenges. We are hopeful that civic engagement and voter turnout is an upward trend in Boston, and we want to make sure your department's well staffed and well funded to meet the challenges going forward. So thank you so much. And I would like to see a debriefing session after the election to see what went well and see what we can improve next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Braden. Councillor Mejia.
Yes. So thank you again, Commissioner Tavares. I mean, I have to say that you started off in a very traumatic way with recounts to have to oversee, and then a global pandemic to have to figure out how to ensure that every vote counts. And so I just have to commend you and your entire staff for really leading under these circumstances. So I think that, you know, the work that you're doing is heroic in many ways. So I just want to thank you for all of that. And I would be remiss if I did not echo and continue to push and advocate to ensure that our incarcerated residents, constituents, because, you know, we work for them too, that they also have an opportunity to cast their vote and to be heard. And I think that this is really, even it's not just about making history, but it's really about righting the wrong. For far too many years, we've created barriers that prevented people from participating in their own lives. And if this is the moment that we can take off that Band-Aid, and it might hurt because it might take on a little bit extra work, I think that work will be worth the effort. And so whatever you need from us to help support you in that process, please, you know, let it be known. We have 20 days to figure out what we can do now. And if we can't do it now, then we have to figure out what we can do to ensure that we don't come across this issue again and feel like we're hopeless. But I'm still fighting for this election. And I still think that we have time to make something happen in 20 days. And I'm hoping, I don't know who from the mayor's team is here listening. Neil, usually I don't see his little face up in here, but anyone else from the mayor's office to know that I will be asking and encouraging you to step up this election to support our incarcerated constituents and making sure that they can vote this year. That's going to be what I'm advocating for. Thank you.
Councillor, well, it looks like it's me. Or Councillor Flynn, I'm sorry, Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Thank you, Councillor O'Malley. Excellent hearing. Thank you to the commissioner, your dedicated team at Election Department for your professionalism and dedication, hard work. Voting is a civil right that can never be compromised. It's critical we work together to ensure equal access to polling locations. Thank you.
So with that, I want to say thank you so much, Commissioner, for being here. And I know Sabina was also on deck and prepared and was listening the entire time. Your office has risen to the occasion in some of the weirdest and craziest circumstances. So I hope what you hear from us is encouragement and excitement, and if anything, a willingness to want to give you the resources to only further your work and your leadership. I look forward to hearing if there's what we can do in the meantime when it comes to a potential drop box at the House of Corrections. And I look forward to the debrief after all of this. I think if at anything, we've demonstrated when you make it easy, people will vote. And so we don't really have, all we can do is learn and grow from here. I look forward to the day where 100% of us are voting, because it's just so natural and part of all of our cultures to do so. So until that happens, we'll be on on the grind, and I know the commissioner will be, and so will the city of Boston and all the counselors. Thank you so much for your time. Have a good day. Working session's ended.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair. Thank
Thanks, everyone.